You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
Right up Meridian, baby.
Welcome to the Right Up Meridian podcast. The Pacers' regular season has begun, and it has not been a pretty start for your Indiana Pacers. We'll get to that in just a moment. Once again, the Right Up Meridian podcast is brought to you by the Back Home Network, and of course, the Back Home Network is presented by Home Field Apparel. Use code HOME23 for 15% off at homefieldapparel.com. And I just saw they just released a few embroidered quarter zips for IU. Obviously, IU football right now, kind of the hottest topic in the country. So go check out some of those quarter zips. Of course, I am your host, as always, Zion Brown, here to talk about the Pacers now and their disappointing 0-4 start. Recording this on Thursday early afternoon after the Pacers took a 2-point 107-105 loss last night against the Dallas Mavericks on the road. And man, Pacers had a chance to win it, right? It looked like one of those, maybe not so miraculous, but one of those kind of unlikely comebacks once again from this team, even though it's obviously a way different set of guys than what we had seen last year throughout the regular season and in that playoff run. But it looked like the Pacers were going to have a chance. Ray J. Dennis at the line got intentionally fouled as the Pacers had the ball down 3, with about 3 seconds left, made the first, and then had a great intentional miss on the second free throw. The Pacers were just able to tap the ball back out to the three-point line where Aaron Nesmith had a chance to win it, right? He had that open look from 3 and couldn't knock it down, and that was the story of Nesmith tonight. He just struggled. 5 points, 2 of 16 from the field, 1 of 9 from the three-point line for Nesmith. Just not a Aaron Nesmith type of game that we are used to seeing. And it hasn't been a great start to the year for him, just in general, after that contract extension he got. But he's just been struggling, only averaging 11 points, which is fine, but shooting 29% from the field and a shocking 29% from the free throw line for Aaron Nesmith so far this season. Just a really weird start to the season for a guy who kind of made his reputation over the last, I'd say, 2 years as one of the better shooters in the league, starting off 2 of 7 at the free throw line. Clearly not ideal for Nesmith and just struggling for some reason. I think it's become mental. You saw him after the game ended yesterday just walk off the court completely, right, once that last 3 didn't go in. But he got a good look at it. Couldn't get the fall. Was 0 for 2 on his free throws last night. But you commend the fight once again from the Pacers. Rick Carlisle is still coaching as hard as he can and as hard as he can with the team and all these injuries, but it's an 0-4 start nonetheless. And it really looks like this team is going to continue to struggle until at least they get some of these guys back. Right now, not really playing with real point guards. You see Ben Shepherd playing a lot of point guard minutes. Pascal Siakam is asked to facilitate a lot. And Ray J. Dennis, who I just mentioned, has had a much larger role than this team would probably like. Mac McClung got signed 2 days ago and played in the game yesterday, played significant minutes in that game yesterday because they needed him to. Right, they were able to sign McClung, who's known as the dunk contest king, kind of, and this guy that's been around the G League for a while. And the Pacers just needed a body, so they picked him up, and they signed him to a multi-year deal, so he will be on this roster, right, for the foreseeable future. But it is a poor start for this team, and it leaves a lot of questions with this team. If you haven't been keeping up and paying attention, the injuries have just piled up. I'll read the injury report from last night just to put it in perspective. There's 8 guys on this injury report. Taylor Peter was out with the right groin strain. Obi Toppin was out with the right foot stress reaction. Benedict Mathurin with the right great toe sprain. Johnny Furphy had a left foot bone bruise. A lot of foots here. Andrew Nimhard, left shoulder strain. Cam Jones, lower back stress reaction. TJ McConnell suffered that left hamstring strain back in the preseason. It'll be another week or 2 before we'll get a real update on whether he'll be able to come back soon. And then, of course, Tyrese Haliburton with the right Achilles tendon tear. So 8 dudes out of the lineup. And most of those guys outside of are guards outside of Johnny Furphy and Obi Toppin. Everybody else there is some sort of guard and some sort of ball handler really at that. And so to miss all of those players and to still put up a fight against the Mavericks team. And you saw Anthony Davis got hurt in the middle of that game as well for Dallas. So both teams, I don't know, it kind of became hampered in that one. And it's just about who had more, who could do it more with less. And still the Pacers still had way less than what Dallas had available to them. But nevertheless, the Mavericks were able to eke that one out. And it's kind of like crazy how much has changed in just 6 days, because you go to the start of this year, the very first game the Pacers played last Thursday night at home, finals rematch against OKC. They take the team to double overtime. OKC wins the game as a lot of Pacers fouled out of that game, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had a crazy 50-point performance. But you look at that, and that was such an encouraging sign to see the way they fought and see the way they're still able to play solidly without Tyrese Haliburton, who we know will be out all season. And then you look now, 3 games later, the Pacers still haven't picked up a win, and the injuries have gotten even worse for this team. And you're just left wondering, how much more can they sustain before it is time to tank, time to kind of nail it in, right? And me and Scott talked about this on our preview episode when we kind of previewed the whole East and tried to rank where we thought the Pacers matched up amongst the East. And Scott was less optimistic than I was when he just basically said, hey, if it's not going well, if it's not looking like a guarantee that this team is going to be in the playoffs, we could see that tank start to happen. And right now, an 0-4 start, right? One of only a handful of teams in the NBA that is still yet to win a game. And you just look at it and you say, okay, what do we have going on here, right? It's the Pacers, the Nets, who we all expected to be trash, and the Pelicans, who they've got their own thing going on, right? They traded their own pick for this upcoming draft and the Pacers pick back to the Pacers that they had initially as a part of the Siakam trade. And obviously those two teams, the Pelicans and the Raptors, made a trade afterwards with that pick. But this Pelicans team could have had 2 top 5 or whatever picks in this upcoming draft. Looks like they'll have neither of those. That's a whole other story with them. But you look at the Pacers and you say, okay, when is it time to maybe mail it in? And obviously it's not even November yet, right? It's October 30th. So it's still too early to really say, okay, mail it in. But you can still kind of look at the trajectory and the overall rhythm of where this is going and say it's not looking great, right? And I mentioned having to sign Mac McClung to that deal. With all due respect to Mac McClung, I don't know how much that'll change for this team, right? He played 12 minutes last night and scored 7 points, but I'm not sure how much that'll really change for this team to get in this guy who has very, very limited NBA action, right? That was his 7th career game that he played in last night. And so you look at him, he's a guy that's played for 5 different teams in those 7 games. But you look at him where you say, okay, I don't really think that's going to change the trajectory of this team, or even it's a body, right? And he won, basically. They tried out a few guys apparently in Dallas the other day, and he basically was the best that they saw of those guys they tried out. So kudos to him for that. But look at it and you say, okay, he hasn't played much NBA action, and I'm not really sure what his addition will do for this team. And so now it is about just what does the rest of this year look like? Right now, we don't know the severity of the injuries to Andrew Nembhard and Benedict Mathurin. Right now, the severity is unknown. Mathurin was called week to week by Rick Carlisle, and I saw Nembhard was getting some court work in, but there's no real status on when he would potentially be able to return. So you look at those guys. I think a lot of people who still had faith in the Pacers this year, me included, even a little bit, we looked at it and said, we think those 2 guys can be, really impactful, right? Even if they're not Tyrese Haliburton level, you look at those 2 guys that can really score themselves. Nembhard, of course, a good facilitator and a great defender. Mathurin, a volume scorer type of guy who, in the first game and a half or whatnot against OKC and against Memphis, looked like he was on this, pace to really take it to another level this season in a contract year. Now he'll be week to week. Hopefully he comes back in November, but week to week means basically we don't know exactly how long it'll be. It'll just be reevaluated every week. And then you look in the front court also, Obi Toppin will be out for at least a month for this team as well. And so it's a bleak outlook, I would say, until we know the severity of those injuries, specifically to the backcourt pairing of Andrew Nembhard and Benedict Mathurin. And for right now, you just don't know. There's so many questions around it. There's so many uncertainties around what this team wants to do for the rest of the season without their star player and now without so many of their key role players, right? You count them up, guys that would have played of the other 7 who are out. TJ McConnell obviously would have been in the rotation. Nembhard and Mathurin and Toppin would have been in the rotation. That's at least 4. I don't think Taylor Peter would have been in the regular rotation had the injuries to Tyrese and TJ McConnell not happened. But you look at those 4, and then I think Cam Jones would have had a shot to be in the rotation. I think probably one of Jones or Peter would have been in the rotation. And so you make that 5, and then Johnny Furphy, I believe, also would have played for the Pacers. He played in game one. I don't think they had planned for him to play against OKC because he did already have his injury, but he was available, and then they had to just put him in at the end when a lot of those guys fouled out. But look at the way Johnny Furphy played in the summer league in the preseason and the way they talk about him, I also think he would have played as well. So of those 7 guys, I believe 6 of them probably would have been the Pacers' freaking rotation, but instead we're seeing these Quentin Jackson minutes again. He's seen Ben Shepherd kind of play the point guard a lot, which is not really his designated role. I mentioned Ray J. Dennis already, right? And this team had to cut James Wiseman. They were looking for a point guard all throughout training camp anyway, and they had to cut James Wiseman, who started the second game against Memphis, but they had to let him go to bring in Mac McClung, and they just felt like he was kind of the odd man out in that center room between Jay Huff and Tony Bradley and Isaiah Jackson. So Wiseman is no longer with the Pacers, but you look at it and you say, is it time to tank? My answer is yes. And just because you look at all of these injuries and it doesn't feel like the injuries are going to stop, like, don't get me wrong, they're not going to have 8 players missing the rest of the year. But it's not just a couple of injuries that are going to be fixed and ready to go again in a couple weeks, right? Like I said, Toppin will be at least a month. Mathurin, at least a week. I'd assume that's at least 2 weeks. When you talk about a week-to-week guy or maybe a week and a half, and then you just don't really know with Nembhard. McConnell's already missed a week. He'll probably miss at least another. And you just look at the way these are adding up. This team is not going to be able to string together too many wins, in my opinion, to start the year. And then you're playing catch-up. And it's like, obviously we saw this team play catch-up for all of last season after the 10-15 start they had. But you're playing catch-up in that situation with a team that the year before had shown you they can get to the conference finals and they can be a legit championship contender. So sure, they had to play catch up, and they did have some injuries, specifically the Nesmith injury, I think was more important last year than maybe people realized nationally. And once Aaron Nesmith came back, the team kind of changed from that perspective. But they were able to play catch up. They were able to get all the way up to the 4 seed and make it to the finals. This year, you're playing catch up to get to the 9 seed, be in the play-in, and probably eventually still get bounced out of the first round. It's like, the goals here are different. Even if you're saying, okay, we can get back into it, we can go on a run, we can go on a hot streak, and we can really still be a quality team. When you say quality team, it's not what it was last year. It's a middling team in the East and a team that is basically signing up to probably lose in the first round to New York or to Cleveland or whoever that may be. Milwaukee looks good right now as well. And so I just don't really understand or think the Pacers would want that. Maybe they do. Obviously, this team historically hasn't really tanked much, right? I think the one season you could say they tanked was 3 years ago when they traded, 4 years ago, when they traded for Tyrese Haliburton. That would have been the 21-22 season. And that season, they didn't go in with tanking expectations, but once again, injuries affected that team to start the year, and then eventually they just cut the ties and cut the cord with Domantas Sabonis, trading him for Haliburton and making a couple other trades to kind of go down the gutter the rest of that year. And then Tyrese got here and he played a little bit and he had to miss some time as well. I think Miles missed the last month or so of that season. And that was the last really full total tank that this team did, was in 2022. Then the year after that, they weren't taking. Tyrese got hurt. And that kind of impacted the rest of the season. And, of course, the last 2 seasons they've made deep playoff runs. And so it's not really a thing that this Pacers team has done under Kevin Pritchard or any general manager, right, under the last few years, under the history of the franchise. But I think you just look at it and you're realistic. You look at this draft class, by the way, which obviously the college basketball season hasn't even begun. But just based on what we've seen in exhibitions, it looks like there's 3 guys in this draft who are going to be really impactful NBA players and maybe star-level players, right, with Cameron Booza, Darren Peterson, and AJ DeBonsa. And so when I see it, I just think that might be the best thing to do, because the ceiling on this team, I don't even think the ceiling on this team is winning a round of the playoffs. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe everybody gets back and gets healthy and this team gets up to a 5 or a 6 seed and wins a round. I just don't see that as the outlook as of right now, but who knows? And the reason I think that is because from a outlook perspective, the offense just looks so deteriorated. Right now, the Pacers are 28th in offensive rating without Tyrese Haliburton this season. And obviously anybody who watched this team over the last few years knows This was an electric, explosive offense over the past 2 seasons. And right now to be 28th in offensive rating is nowhere near where this team expects to be. Last season, they were 9th in offensive rating. And the year before that, they were 2nd. And so the fact that they're currently 28th, once again, you're missing some people. Maybe you'd be 23rd if those guards and those other guys are in the lineup. But the fact that it looks like they can't generate any true offense through 4 games of this season makes me feel like most of the season will look like that. And they'll have nights where they get hot, right? Because those are the type of players they have. Obi Toppin will get hot at night. Of course, Benedict Mathurin can score a lot. Nembhard will get hot. Pascal Siakam's always going to get you that 20 points and whatnot. And so they'll have those days like that. There will be those TJ McConnell 18 and 11 games or whatnot. But from a game-to-game basis, I don't see it happening for this offense. And the defense has been fine, I guess. But it hasn't been like enough to offset how much the offense has struggled. The defense right now, 14th in defensive rating. And defensive rating a week into the season is extremely useless, right? Because there's so much variance and just shot making, right? You get a week into the season and, maybe you're playing a team that is missing a lot of wide open shots, or you're playing a team that's making some shots they would have usually hit. But I don't foresee this being like a top 8 defense or a top 7 defense this season. And so that won't really be enough to offset and negate those offensive shortcomings. And I just want to, take this time to appreciate and recognize Tyrese Haliburton for the engine he was. I don't think a lot of people nationally, I think Pacers fans realize it, but looked at other fan bases throughout these last couple of playoff runs or national people, and they would say, oh man, Obi Toppin just scored 21 points in this game. Tyrese only had to score 14. And it's like, yes, that is true. You have guys like Obi Toppin and Andrew Nembhard and whoever else who can get you shots. Miles Turner, over the last few playoff runs, who at times, yes, they did go off and have these great performances, but it's off the gravity, it's off the passing and the shooting gravity that Tyrese Haliburton creates, right? And shout out to our guy, Tony East. He tweeted this last night, and I thought it was really telling and indicative. The Pacers, throughout these first 4 games, have not yet shot 44% from the field. They did that in 70 of the 82 regular season games last year. Guys, it's not a coincidence. It's not just like, oh man, they're cold to start this year. No, that's not what's happening. It is the fact that they are missing their guy, their franchise player, their offensive engine, and really one of the best offensive engines in the NBA right now. Tyrese is the engine. People need to understand that, and people need to really recognize how much different this team is offensively without him on the court. And it's not always the assist numbers, because I know people get caught up in that, and obviously Tyrese has great assist numbers, but it's a lot of these like hit-ahead passes that lead to somebody, attacking a closeout, that lead to another pass, that lead to a dunk or a layup or whatnot. It's those sorts of plays as well that don't go in the stat sheet, may look very minute even if you are watching the game, but it's these type of plays that Haliburton makes play after play to where the Pacers are always getting good shots. You look at it when he's on the court, it feels like this team almost always gets good shots when Tyrese Haliburton's on the court, right? The one series where there were times where that wasn't happening over the last 2 years was the Thunder series, and that was an all-time great defense. But if you look at the numbers, last year in the regular season, the Pacers offense was almost 7 points per 100 possessions better with him on the court. In the playoffs, it was plus 14.3 offensive rating with him on the court. 2 years ago, it was plus 4.3 with him in the regular season, plus 6.5 in the postseason. You look at this guy and just how great of a scorer and passer he is and the way he balances the two out, and you feel like he's one of those guys. Luka is one of those players, obviously Nikola Jokic, Trae Young. There's these players where it's like, if he's on the floor, we are probably going to create very, very good, if not great, offense. And that is what Tyrese Haliburton has been for the Pacers. And you look at what the offense has done without him, even still with All-Star Pascal Siakam, who is still playing like an All-Star. Like, I'm not going to take that away from Siakam. He's still playing tremendous basketball, right? Averaging 26 through these 4 games and shooting 44% from the field, but averaging 26, 11, and 5 so far, while still being tasked with a lot defensively. That's something I've kind of been surprised with. It seems like Siakam's responsibilities on the defensive end haven't even gone down. in this time where he's been the number one option again for this Pacers team. But just in general, without Tyrese Haliburton, this is not a top 15 offense. And right now, it's not even a top 25 offense in the NBA. And so I seen a couple people tweet like, hey, I might vote Tyrese Haliburton or make Tyrese Haliburton fit my MVP voting this season. And it's like, that'd be silly to do. Obviously, duh. Voters don't do that. Don't vote for somebody who's not playing any games. But you look at it and you do say, yes, he is one of the more valuable players in the NBA, specifically because what he means to a team's offense and to this team's offense. And so once again, I say all that to say that's the reason I tank, because if the drop-off was from a top 10 offense to a mediocre, maybe like a 17th offense in the league, maybe you could put something together and still be a solid enough team to make the playoffs and potentially win a series. But it's not that. If you watch these 4 games, it's not that. And I want to keep harping on the fact that this offense will get better when some of those guys get back. But I guess my whole point is there's no reason to rush any of these guys back. Maybe Benedict Mathurin wants to kind of come back quickly here because he doesn't have a contract secured for next season and he wants to show his worth, whether that be to the Pacers or to other teams in the NBA, right? If he has to miss significant time, that's going to be a big hit for him in a contract year. But anybody else from this team, I would say you go down, you take an injury and take your time being 100% before you come back, because right now I just highly doubt this team is playing for anything serious this season just because of everything. And this upcoming stretch of the year for the Pacers, it's going to mean a lot. This next week, I should say, is going to mean a lot. They have 3 games in 4 nights coming up. Back-to-back Friday, Saturday at home against the Hawks and against the Warriors. And then Monday, they host Milwaukee. I'll talk about that in a moment, but they host Milwaukee, and there's the Miles Turner of it all there. And then they end this 4-game homestand by hosting the Brooklyn Nets on Wednesday. My thing is, if they can't go 2-2, at least split this. Still 2-2 would mean they're 2-6 on the year. But if they can't split this, if they win 1 game and they're 1-7, or worst case scenario, they lose all 4, an 0-8 start. I know they kind of did something impossible last season, starting 10-15 and making it all the way to Game 7 of the finals. I don't know the numbers. I don't know the statistics. I highly doubt any team that has started 0-8 in an NBA season has even won a playoff series, maybe not even made the playoffs, 0-8 start, right? But if you can't even go 2-2 here, my question is legitimately, what are you playing for? If you can't get to 2-6, what are you playing for? And you've got the Nets. You assume they beat the Nets in that Wednesday game. The Nets look very, very bad. And as they should look, right? You look at a team that's led by Cam Thomas and Michael Porter Jr. and Nick Claxton, right? Those are okay players, but none of those players are supposed to be the best player on any NBA team right now. So you can't beat the Nets, and then you got to beat the Nets, and then win one of those other 3 versus the Bucks, Warriors, or the Hawks. If not, I say shut it down and not shut it down, but embrace the tank, lean into the tank. Manage the minutes of the older guys like TJ McConnell, who's not even playing yet, obviously, and Pascal Siakam, just guys like that. And really just think you got to have the long-term outlook on this. If you're the Pacers, if you're Kevin Pritchard, I know it's probably killing Rick Carlisle inside. He's a guy who's been so anti-tank and so anti, young guys, but he's had to now kind of embrace it over the last few seasons. And obviously he got these guys to the pinnacle just about getting to Game 7 of the finals. But now we're kind of back in this mode with the Pacers where Tyrese is out. And you got to kind of be smart about, how you're approaching your lineups and whatnot, and what you're really looking for from a coaching perspective, and realizing it's not necessarily about winning every specific game every night. And more so it is about getting the right development, finding out what a guy's role is, finding out really what he means to a team. And so these next 4 games, huge for the Pacers. I am curious. I'll probably podcast again next Thursday or Friday afterwards and give my thoughts on the 4 games, but I really have no clue what to expect in these 4 games. If they go 3-1, then I might come here next Thursday or Friday and completely change my mind and say, you know what, go for it. This team, get healthy again and see what you can do. But anything worse than 2-2, 1-3, or 0-4 would be extremely, extremely concerning. All right, I'll talk about for a couple of minutes here to wrap up that game on Monday against Milwaukee. And my thing is, I'll put this all as a poll even on Spotify and YouTube as well. Folks, do we think we see a Miles Turner tribute video? Now, as I'm recording this, I believe Miles Turner just recently, like in the last day or so, went on another podcast and is still talking about the Pacers situation, which I don't love. Like, let it go. The Pacers, I haven't seen a single Pacers player really say much about it. The franchise kind of addressed it from a coach and a Kevin Pritchard perspective way back in the offseason. I don't really know if they've had much more to say about it afterwards. But right now, it seems like Turner is still saying things about the Pacers, still talking about Tyrese Haliburton and things like that. And so my question is, do we see a tribute video for Miles Turner when he returns for this game on Monday, right? Obviously, guy spent 10 seasons with the Pacers, was one of the longest tenured guys with one franchise in the NBA before he decided to sign with the Bucks. And I want to say they give him one of those videos, but I'm just not sure. And what I could see happening is he does get one of those tribute videos, one of those return tribute videos. And then after that, the rest of the night, it's kind of boos and jeers from the fans. But I'll be tuned into that game on Monday just for that reason, just to lock in, just to see if Miles Turner gets one of those tributes in. By the way, if you've seen his stats, they haven't been great. I haven't watched a ton of the Bucks. I do think he's made an impact defensively with them, but so did Brook Lopez, right? I think Miles, the good thing with him was just his offensive impact was more than Brook did at the center position last year. But look at Miles' stats so far through a few games, averaging just 8.7 rebounds and shooting 32% from the field. 23% on three. So he's really struggled to put the ball in the basket right now for the Bucks. Obviously, we see Miles. That probably won't last as far as those low of percentages for him. But once again, I am curious to see what he is without Tyrese Haliburton. And I want to emphasize this and word this the right way. Giannis is a better player than Tyrese Haliburton. That is clear. But again, when you talk about offensive engines, when you talk about creating open looks for not just yourself, but everybody on the team, possession after possession, Tyrese is better at that part of the game. And so I don't think necessarily that Miles' life, even though there might be more spacing because of all the attention that Giannis draws, I don't think necessarily that Miles' life is made easier by playing with a guy like Giannis, even though Giannis is clearly a much better player, right? Giannis has an argument right now for the best player in the league. I think there's a handful of guys. It's him, it's Jokic, it's Shea, and at this point, I'm throwing Victor Wembanyama in that conversation because he's looked like an animal so far to start the year. And so Giannis is a better player. This Bucks team appears to be better than the Pacers are so far this season, and I know me and Scott talked about that. And I said they would be better than the Bucks just because they have the best player in the East. And it looks like they are better right now, 3-1 on the season, as opposed to the Pacers 0-4. But that'll be a scene in Gainbridge Fieldhouse on Monday. And I'll be watching just to see how that interaction goes, to see if there's any specific, interactions that Miles himself has with the crowd. And of course, got to see what he says after the game, win, lose, or whatever, just to see how Miles feels about it and what he says about the fan base and the reception he gets down there in Gainbridge Fieldhouse after the game. But like I said, this homestand, huge for the Pacers. And we'll be back next week to kind of wrap it up, or not wrap it up, but to break it down and to see where they should continue to, project and traject this team going forward. But right now, this team is still looking for its first win of the season. They're one of 3 NBA teams to not have a win yet this year. With this 0-4 start, this is appearing to be worse than the year that Paul George missed, that 2014-15 season, when the Pacers almost got in on the last day of the season into the playoffs. Right now, this team is right at the bottom of the East with the Nets. And it's going to be a bit of an uphill climb to get their way back into things, but still just a week into the season. There's 78 more games of basketball to be played. And so we'll see how these next few turn out for the Pacers. But this has been an episode of Right Up Meridian. Thank you for listening. And make sure to go check out these other Back Home Network podcasts. There's so many going on right now. Crimson Cast, Football Weather, Big Red Carpet, Sideline Stories, all of these podcasts going on right now at the Dribble Drive with Austin Rinder, as well as college basketball season starts in just a few days here. So excited for that. You'll hear all this content from it. Assembly Call will be back and doing their thing, covering the men's basketball team. And so make sure to give it a listen to all of these incredible Back Home Network podcasts. Once again, I've been Zion Brown, and this has been Right Up Meridian.